I watched my daughter-in-law slip Zoloft into my wine at my own retirement party. Rebecca crushed the 50-milligram tablet between two spoons, stirring the powder into my Cabernet with her perfectly manicured finger, the same finger that had been forging my signature for months. She handed me the glass with that angelic smile everyone in town adored. "Here you go, Arthur. You deserve to relax tonight." I took it without hesitation. "Thank you, Rebecca. You always know exactly what I need." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was Riverside's beloved Volunteer of the Year, drugging a retired teacher at his own celebration. The same woman who'd stolen nearly $900,000 from my children's literacy foundation. But Rebecca had no idea what was coming next. If you think you know how this story ends, trust me, you don't. Keep listening. You need to understand who Rebecca Mason Caldwell was in our town of Riverside. Or rather, who everyone thought she was. Picture this. A 42-year-old real estate agent with highlighted blonde hair, always impeccably dressed, always volunteering for the right causes. She served on 5 charity boards simultaneously: the Riverside Food Bank, the Animal Rescue Coalition, the Youth Mentorship Program, the Senior Care Initiative, and my pride and joy, the Sarah Caldwell Children's Literacy Foundation. In 2023, the Riverside Gazette named her Volunteer of the Year. The photo showed her presenting a $12,000 check to the elementary school library, beaming like she'd personally funded every book on those shelves. But here's what the newspaper didn't know: that $12,000 came from my foundation. Money I'd donated anonymously after my wife Sarah died 3 years ago. I'm Arthur Caldwell, 68 years old, retired elementary school teacher. Spent 30 years watching kids struggle with reading, watching some of them slip through the cracks because they didn't have books at home. When Sarah passed from cancer, I liquidated everything we'd saved, our entire retirement fund, $450,000, and created the foundation in her memory. Most people saw me as just another small-town teacher. But before I discovered my calling in education, I spent 15 years as a forensic accountant. I knew numbers, I knew patterns, and I knew when something didn't add up. The foundation had been wildly successful. In 3 years, we'd raised over $1.2 million. Corporate sponsors loved the cause. Parents held bake sales. Even kids donated their allowance money. Rebecca, as our volunteer coordinator, managed the day-to-day operations while I focused on fundraising and program development. She was perfect for the role. Organized, articulate, trusted by everyone. The bank manager, Patricia Stone, practically lit up whenever Rebecca walked in with deposit slips. "That woman is a saint," Patricia would say. "Riverside is lucky to have her." Rebecca played the part beautifully. Always the first to arrive at board meetings, always staying late to finish the paperwork. She'd send me detailed weekly reports, how many books we'd distributed, which schools needed more funding, which kids were showing improvement. But saints don't drive $89,000 BMW X5s on a real estate agent's salary. That detail first caught my attention 6 months ago. I was walking to the post office when I saw Rebecca climbing out of that pristine white SUV in the bank parking lot. The temporary tags were still in the window. I'd been in the car business long enough to recognize expensive when I saw it. Then came the vacation photos on Facebook. Rebecca and my son Timothy had spent 2 weeks in Italy last spring. Not budget Italy, luxury Italy. 5-star hotels in Rome, private wine tours in Tuscany, first-class flights. Timothy's teacher salary and Rebecca's real estate commissions were decent, but not spontaneous European vacation decent. I started paying closer attention. The foundation's bank statements arrived monthly, but Rebecca always collected the mail. "I'll handle the boring financial stuff, Arthur," she'd say. "You focus on the big picture." For 2 years, I'd been grateful for her efficiency. But when you've spent 15 years detecting financial fraud, certain habits die hard. In September, I asked Patricia Stone for duplicate statements sent directly to my home address. What I found made my blood run cold. Between March 2023 and September 2024, someone had written 47 unauthorized checks on the foundation account. Each one bore my forged signature. The amounts were carefully calculated, never large enough to trigger automatic bank reviews, but substantial enough to fund a very comfortable lifestyle. $1,500 here for educational supplies, $3,000 there for book transportation costs, $5,000 for emergency school funding. The checks were spread across 18 months, making the pattern almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. The total? $890,247, nearly $900,000 stolen from children who needed books. I sat in my kitchen for 3 hours that night, staring at those bank statements spread across Sarah's old dining table. My wife had believed so deeply in the power of literacy to change lives. She'd volunteered at the library every Tuesday for 12 years, reading to preschoolers whose parents worked double shifts. Rebecca hadn't just stolen money. She'd stolen Sarah's legacy. But here's the thing about forensic accounting. You don't just find the crime. You build the case. Emotions don't hold up in court. Evidence does. I needed more than bank statements. I needed documentation, witnesses, and a smoking gun that even Rebecca's perfect reputation couldn't deflect. So I did what any good accountant would do. I started investigating. The next morning, I called Dorothy Hawkins, our foundation's treasurer. Dorothy was 71, sharp as a tack, and had been managing nonprofit finances since before Rebecca was born. "Dorothy," I said, "I need to ask you something confidential. Have you noticed anything unusual about our foundation accounts lately?" There was a long pause. Then, "Arthur, I've been hoping you'd call. We need to talk." Dorothy Hawkins lived in a modest ranch house on Elm Street, the same house she'd shared with her late husband for 42 years. When I arrived that Tuesday morning, she had coffee brewing and a manila folder thick with documents waiting on her kitchen table. "I've been losing sleep over this for weeks," she said, settling into her chair with the careful movements of someone whose arthritis had been acting up. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, but the numbers just don't lie. She opened the folder and pulled out a handwritten ledger. Dorothy was old school. She kept personal records of every foundation transaction, cross-referenced with bank statements and receipt copies. "Look at this," she said, pointing to an entry from May 2024. Rebecca submitted a request for $4,200 to buy books for Lincoln Elementary. I approved it, you signed it, or so I thought, and the check cleared on May 15th. She flipped to another page. "But here's the problem. I called Lincoln Elementary last week to ask how the kids liked their new books. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, had no idea what I was talking about. They never received any books from our foundation in May." My stomach dropped. "What did you tell her?" "That I'd look into it and get back to her." "But Arthur, if Lincoln Elementary didn't get those books, where did that $4,200 go?" Dorothy pulled out more documents. Phone records from her calls to schools, email exchanges with principals, a pattern of missing deliveries, confused administrators, and children who never received the books that Rebecca claimed to have purchased in their names. "I've verified 12 transactions so far," Dorothy continued, $51,000 in book purchases that never reached their intended recipients. And that's just what I could confirm in the last 3 months. She handed me a photograph printed from her phone. "I took this outside Rebecca's house last week." The image showed Rebecca's driveway, the BMW X5, gleaming in the afternoon sun. But parked beside it was something I hadn't expected. A brand new Harley-Davidson motorcycle, still wearing dealer plates. "Timothy never mentioned wanting a motorcycle," I said. "Because it's not Timothy's," Dorothy replied. "I asked my neighbor's grandson. He works at the Harley dealership. That bike was purchased 3 weeks ago for $17,000. Cash." The pieces were falling into place. Rebecca wasn't just stealing for necessities or even luxuries. She was living a completely different life, funded by money meant for children's education. Dorothy's next revelation hit me like a physical blow. "Arthur, there's something else, something personal that makes this even worse." She pulled out a printed email. "I've been going through old correspondence, trying to understand when this all started. Look at this message Rebecca sent to the bank in March 2023. The email was brief but devastating. Please update our foundation's primary contact information. Mr. Caldwell has requested that all statements and correspondence be directed to me due to his increasing memory issues. We want to ensure proper oversight of the foundation's finances during this transition." I read it twice, my hands shaking. "Memory issues?" "She's been telling people you're developing dementia, Arthur. Subtle hints at first comments about you seeming confused in meetings, forgetting details you'd discussed. She even suggested to Patricia Stone that the board might need to consider protective measures for your assets. The manipulation was breathtaking. Rebecca hadn't just stolen money, she'd systematically undermined my credibility to cover her tracks. If anyone questioned irregular transactions, she could point to my supposed mental decline as the explanation. How long has she been saying this? Based on what I can piece together? At least a year, maybe longer. Dorothy's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much human cruelty in her 71 years. Arthur, she's been positioning herself as your protector while robbing you blind. I thought about the family dinners where Rebecca would gently interrupt me if I repeated a story, the way she'd finish my sentences with patient understanding, the concerned looks she'd exchange with Timothy when I couldn't remember where I'd put my reading glasses. None of it was random. All of it was calculated. "What do we do?" Dorothy asked. That's when my forensic accounting background kicked in. You don't build a fraud case on emotion or even obvious evidence. You build it on documentation so comprehensive that denial becomes impossible. We investigate properly, I said. Every transaction, every forged signature, every lie she's told. We build a case that's so airtight that her reputation won't matter. Dorothy nodded grimly. What do you need from me? Everything. Phone records of your calls to schools, email correspondence, any documentation showing the disconnect between what Rebecca claimed to purchase and what actually reached the children. Over the next hour, we developed our strategy. Dorothy would continue her verification calls, documenting each fraudulent transaction. I would handle the banking investigation and signature analysis. We'd work separately to avoid suspicion, sharing information through encrypted emails. But as I drove home, a new concern emerged. Rebecca was smart, methodical, and had spent 18 months perfecting her system. If she discovered our investigation before we'd gathered sufficient evidence, she might disappear, along with any remaining foundation funds. We needed to move fast, but we also needed to be invisible. What I didn't know was that Rebecca was already planning her next move. And this time, she wasn't just targeting the foundation's money, she was coming for me. The next 3 months became a masterclass in covert investigation. I approached it like any forensic audit, methodical, documented, and absolutely secret. My first stop was Patricia Stone at Riverside Community Bank. Patricia had been handling our foundation account for 2 years, and I needed her cooperation without raising Rebecca's suspicions. Patricia, I'm conducting a routine audit of our foundation finances, I told her during a Tuesday morning visit. I need copies of all check images and deposit records for the past 18 months for insurance purposes. Patricia's expression shifted from helpful to concerned. Is everything all right, Mr. Caldwell? Rebecca mentioned you've been having some memory issues. Should I be coordinating this with her? There it was. Rebecca's preemptive strike in action. My memory is fine, I said calmly. And as the Foundation's primary signatory, I have every right to review our own accounts. I'd prefer to handle this personally. Patricia hesitated, then nodded. Of course. I'll have everything ready by Thursday. When I picked up those documents 2 days later, the scope of Rebecca's fraud became crystal clear. 47 forged checks, each one a nearly perfect replica of my signature, but nearly perfect wasn't good enough for someone trained to spot financial irregularities. My real signature had a distinctive quirk. The A in Arthur included a small loop that most people missed. Rebecca's forgeries were excellent, but that loop was consistently absent. She'd been copying from older checks where the loop wasn't visible. Clearly, I photographed every forged signature, creating a side-by-side comparison with authentic samples. The evidence was undeniable. Next, I needed technological help. My neighbor's son, Jake Mitchell, worked in IT security. Over coffee at my kitchen table, I explained the situation. I need to recover deleted emails from our foundation's account, I told him. Rebecca has administrative access, and I suspect she's been destroying evidence. Jake, 26 and eager to help, brought his laptop over the following weekend. Using data recovery software, we retrieved hundreds of deleted messages from the Foundation's email server. The deleted emails revealed Rebecca's true methodology. Messages to vendors arranging fake invoices for services never rendered, correspondence with a printing company about creating fraudulent receipts, instructions to a graphic designer for producing fake letterheads from schools that had supposedly received donations. But the most damning discovery was a draft email Rebecca had written but never sent. Dated 6 weeks earlier. The old man is getting suspicious. Might need to accelerate timeline and transfer remaining funds before he figures it out. She knew I was on to her. While I gathered digital evidence, Dorothy continued her field investigation. She contacted 43 schools and libraries that had supposedly received foundation funding. Only 8 had actually received anything. The other 35 had no record of donations, deliveries, or even contact from our organization. Dorothy documented each conversation meticulously. Dates, times, names of administrators she spoke with, and exact quotes about what they had or hadn't received. Her handwritten notes read like a prosecutor's dream. Meanwhile, I installed a discreet recording device in the Foundation office, a small digital recorder hidden inside an old calculator that Rebecca never used. Every conversation, every phone call, every meeting would now be documented. The recorder paid off within a week. Rebecca called Timothy from the office, unaware that every word was being captured. "Your father's been asking weird questions about bank statements," she said, her voice tight with stress. "I think he's starting to remember things differently than they actually happened." His confusion is getting worse. Timothy's response broke my heart. Should we talk to his doctor? Maybe it's time to consider power of attorney arrangements. Let's give it a few more months, Rebecca replied. I don't want to rush into anything that might upset him. I'll keep monitoring the situation. She was laying groundwork to have me declared mentally incompetent. By late November, Dorothy and I had assembled a devastating case. Bank records showing $890,000 in fraudulent withdrawals. Signature analysis proving forgery on 47 checks. Email evidence of deliberate deception. Phone records of her lies to schools and vendors. Voice recordings of her manipulation attempts. But we needed one final element public exposure that would make denial impossible. That's when I learned about my retirement party. Timothy called on a Wednesday evening. Dad, Rebecca's organizing a surprise retirement celebration for you. December 15th at the community center. She's invited everyone, your teaching colleagues, foundation board members, half the town. That's very thoughtful of her, I said, though my mind was already working. Rebecca was planning something big. A public event where she'd be the center of attention, probably accepting praise for her dedication to the foundation she'd been robbing. She wanted a stage. I'd give her one. But first, I needed insurance against whatever she was planning for that night. The auditor's letter arrived on a Monday morning in early December. Official letterhead from Morrison & Associates, certified public accountants. A routine review of our foundation's finances, scheduled for January 15th. I hadn't requested any audit. Rebecca called me that same afternoon, her voice strained with what sounded like genuine concern. Arthur, did you see that letter from the accounting firm? They want to examine all our financial records. Yes, I saw it. Standard procedure for nonprofits our size. But Arthur, some of our paperwork from the early months is incomplete. You know how chaotic things were when we first started. I'm worried they might misinterpret some transactions. There it was. Rebecca was panicking. Over the next few days, her behavior became increasingly erratic. She started working late at the foundation office, supposedly organizing files for the audit. But Dorothy, who had keys to the building, discovered something disturbing during an evening drive past the office. Arthur, the lights were on until almost midnight last Thursday, Dorothy told me. I parked across the street and watched. Rebecca carried 3 boxes out to her car around 11:30. Documents were disappearing. But Rebecca's desperation led to her biggest mistake yet. On Friday afternoon, she visited Dr. Harrison, my longtime physician, requesting a private consultation about my concerning memory issues. I know this because Dr. Harrison called me immediately afterward. Arthur, your daughter-in-law just left my office with some very serious allegations about your mental state. She claims you've been showing signs of dementia-forgetting conversations, making irrational financial decisions, becoming paranoid about people stealing from you. My blood pressure spiked. What did you tell her? That patient confidentiality prevents me from discussing your health with anyone without your written consent. But Arthur, she seemed genuinely distressed. She mentioned that the family might need to consider guardianship arrangements. Rebecca was accelerating her timeline. The audit threat had pushed her to attempt What I now realized had been her endgame all along, having me declared mentally incompetent while she maintained control of the Foundation's remaining assets. That weekend, she made her most audacious move yet. Timothy called Sunday evening, his voice heavy with reluctance. "Dad, Rebecca thinks we should meet with a lawyer about some protective legal arrangements. Nothing dramatic, just making sure your affairs are properly managed if your health declines." "What kind of arrangements?" "Power of attorney? Maybe a conservatorship. She's worried about you managing large sums of money if your memory gets worse." The irony was staggering. The woman who'd stolen nearly $900,000 was positioning herself as the protector of my financial welfare. "I appreciate her concern," I said carefully, "but my memory is fine. Perhaps we could discuss this after the holidays?" Timothy agreed, but I could hear Rebecca's voice in the background, insistent and frustrated. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Jake Mitchell and asked him to install a hidden camera system in my home. If Rebecca was planning to drug me into compliance or create evidence of my supposed mental decline, I wanted every second documented. The cameras were installed Tuesday morning, one in the kitchen, one in the living room, one in my home office. Invisible to casual observation, but capable of recording everything in high definition. Rebecca visited Wednesday afternoon, ostensibly to discuss retirement party details. But she spent an unusual amount of time in my kitchen, asking detailed questions about my daily routine, what medications I took, whether I drank wine with dinner. "I want everything to be perfect for your celebration," she said, smiling that practiced smile. "You deserve a night where you can just relax and not worry about anything." As she left, I noticed she'd lingered near my medicine cabinet. When I checked later, my prescription bottle of heart medication had been moved slightly. She was planning something for the retirement party, something that required knowing about my existing medications to avoid dangerous interactions. Rebecca wasn't just going to steal from the Foundation anymore. She was going to eliminate the only witness who could expose her. December 15th arrived with the kind of crisp winter evening that made Riverside feel like a Norman Rockwell painting. The community center buzzed with activity as volunteers transformed the main hall for my retirement celebration. Rebecca had outdone herself. White linens covered 20 round tables, each centerpiece featuring books donated by local families. A touching tribute to my Literacy Foundation work. A projection screen dominated the front wall, presumably for sharing photos from my teaching career. The bar was stocked with premium wine, including several bottles of the Cabernet Sauvignon that Rebecca knew I preferred. 150 people had confirmed attendance. Former teaching colleagues, Foundation board members, parents of students I'd taught over 3 decades, and half the town council. Rebecca had invited everyone who mattered in Riverside. She'd also invited the perfect witnesses for whatever she had planned. I arrived at 6:30, 30 minutes before the official start time. Rebecca was already there, directing final preparations with military precision. She wore a navy blue dress that probably cost more than most teachers made in a week, her blonde hair styled to perfection. "Arthur!" she exclaimed, rushing over with arms extended. "You look wonderful. Are you ready for your big night? As ready as I'll ever be." She guided me through the room, pointing out special touches. "The Riverside Gazette is sending a photographer. Channel 7 might even run a story about the Foundation's success. You're going to be famous." Dorothy arrived at 7 sharp, followed by Patricia Stone from the bank. Jake Mitchell slipped in quietly. I'd asked him to attend as additional documentation of whatever Rebecca had planned. His phone was equipped with a discreet recording app that would capture everything within 20 feet. By 7:15, the hall was packed. The noise level was perfect for concealing conversations, which I suspected was exactly what Rebecca wanted. She clinked a fork against her wineglass, commanding attention. "Welcome, everyone, to a celebration of one of Riverside's most dedicated educators and philanthropists, Arthur Caldwell." Applause filled the room. I smiled and waved, playing the role of grateful retiree, while my mind catalogued potential threats. "Before we begin the formal program," Rebecca continued, "I'd like to personally thank Arthur for trusting me to help manage his beautiful Literacy Foundation. Together, we've distributed over 50,000 books to children who needed them most." The lie came so easily that several people nodded approvingly. Rebecca had always been gifted at public speaking, but tonight her performance felt different, more urgent, more final. I know Arthur would want to say a few words before dinner, she added, but first, let's make sure our guest of honor has everything he needs. She disappeared toward the bar area, returning moments later with 2 glasses of Cabernet. She handed one to me with a flourish that ensured several people noticed her thoughtfulness. A toast to new beginnings, she said, raising her own glass. This was it. The moment she'd been planning. I accepted the glass, holding it carefully while maintaining eye contact. To new beginnings indeed. Around us, conversations resumed. The perfect cover for what she thought would be my gradual incapacitation. But Rebecca had made 3 critical errors in her planning. First, she'd assumed I would drink the wine immediately instead of holding it while socializing. Second, she'd underestimated how closely Dorothy and Jake were watching every interaction. Third, she'd forgotten that I'd spent 3 months preparing for exactly this moment. While she chatted with other guests, basking in their praise for organizing such a lovely event, I made my move. During a brief moment when her attention was elsewhere, I switched our glasses. Rebecca returned to my side just as I raised what had been her glass. "Thank you again for everything you've done," I said, taking a small sip. She lifted what had been my glass, the one she'd carefully prepared. "The pleasure has been all mine, Arthur." The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for it to spring. At 8:15, Rebecca took the microphone to begin the formal program. She'd positioned herself at the front of the room, directly beneath the projection screen, with perfect lighting that made her appear almost angelic. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us to celebrate a man who has dedicated his life to children's education and literacy." The crowd settled into appreciative silence. I sat at the head table, my switched wineglass half empty, watching Rebecca's performance with fascination. "Arthur Caldwell taught elementary school for 30 years, she continued, her voice carrying perfectly throughout the hall. But his real legacy began 3 years ago when he created the Sarah Caldwell Children's Literacy Foundation in memory of his beloved wife. Murmurs of approval rippled through the audience. Several people glanced at me with sympathetic smiles, remembering Sarah's battle with cancer. Under Arthur's vision and my day-to-day management, we've accomplished something truly remarkable. Over $1.2 million raised, 50,000 books distributed, hundreds of children given the gift of literacy. The numbers were accurate, which made the lie even more audacious. Rebecca was taking credit for distributing books that she'd actually stolen money from. "But I have to share something with you tonight that breaks my heart." Rebecca's voice dropped to a more intimate tone. "Arthur's health has been declining recently. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of memory issues that affect many people his age." I felt the room's energy shift. Conversations stopped. People leaned forward, suddenly concerned about the beloved teacher they'd come to honor. "He's been forgetting details about foundation business, misplacing important documents. Sometimes he'll ask me the same question 3 times in one conversation." Timothy, sitting 2 tables away, nodded sadly. He genuinely believed what Rebecca was saying because she'd been conditioning him to see evidence of my supposed decline for months. "That's why," Rebecca continued, her voice growing stronger, "I've been working so hard to ensure the Foundation's continued success. Arthur built something beautiful, and I'm committed to protecting his legacy, even as his ability to manage complex financial matters diminishes." She was publicly establishing the narrative that would justify her control over Foundation assets, brilliant and ruthless. I know this is difficult to hear, and Arthur might not even remember some of the conversations we've had about his condition, but as someone who loves him like family, I felt you all deserved to know the truth. The projection screen flickered to life behind her, displaying a slideshow of Foundation activities. Photos of smiling children with books, Rebecca handing oversized checks to school principals, Arthur me looking increasingly frail and confused in recent images. Those photos had been carefully selected. In each one, I appeared slightly disoriented or tired, captured during moments when I was reading or thinking rather than actively engaging. Rebecca had been building her case for months, one photograph at a time. "Which is why," she said, pausing for effect, "tonight isn't just a retirement celebration. It's also an opportunity to discuss the Foundation's future leadership structure." I realized with growing horror that this wasn't just character assassination. Rebecca was staging a public transition of power, using my supposed mental decline as justification for a complete takeover. I've prepared some documents that would formalize my role as the Foundation's primary administrator, with full authority to make financial decisions on Arthur's behalf, for his protection, and for the children we serve. She gestured toward a table near the bar where manila folders waited, presumably containing power of attorney papers and other legal documents that would strip me of control over my own organization. I know this is a lot to process, Rebecca continued, but those of you who've worked closely with Arthur recently have probably noticed the changes I'm describing. Several heads nodded. Dr. Harrison looked uncomfortable but didn't contradict her publicly. Patricia Stone from the bank appeared genuinely concerned. Even Dorothy seemed uncertain, though she knew the truth about Rebecca's theft. Rebecca's manipulation was masterful. She'd created a situation where disagreeing with her assessment would seem cruel-like denying an obvious truth about a beloved community figure's declining health. "So, before we continue our celebration," she said, raising her wine glass, "I'd like to propose a toast to Arthur's incredible legacy, and to ensuring that legacy continues under proper guidance." The room began lifting glasses in response. Rebecca brought hers to her lips for what she intended to be a ceremonial sip. That's when the Zoloft she'd dissolved in my wine, the wine that was now in her glass, began to take effect. Her hand trembled slightly as she lowered the glass. A look of confusion crossed her face, so brief that most people missed it. But I saw it, and I knew that in the next few minutes, Rebecca's carefully orchestrated performance was about to become something very different. It was time to turn her weapon against her. Rebecca tried to continue her speech, but something was clearly wrong. The Zoloft was working faster than she'd anticipated, probably because she'd crushed it to powder, increasing the absorption rate. "As I was saying," she began, then paused, blinking rapidly. "The Foundation. We need to ensure." Her words started slurring slightly. A few people exchanged concerned glances. I stood up slowly, projecting the calm authority of someone taking control of an uncomfortable situation. "Thank you, Rebecca. I think I'd like to say a few words now." She looked at me with growing confusion, trying to maintain her composure while fighting the medication's effects. "But Arthur, we haven't finished discussing the important matters." "We'll get to those," I said gently, taking the microphone from her increasingly unsteady hands. "Why don't you sit down for a moment?" The crowd watched with polite concern as Rebecca reluctantly took a seat at the head table, her carefully planned presentation derailed. I looked out at the assembled faces, teachers who'd worked with me for decades, parents whose children I'd taught, community leaders who'd supported our foundation, people who deserved to know the truth. "Friends," I began, my voice steady and clear, "Rebecca is right about one thing. Tonight is indeed about transitions and truth, but not the kind she's been describing." I clicked a small remote control in my pocket. Jake Mitchell, positioned near the projection equipment, had been waiting for this signal. The slideshow of Foundation photos disappeared, replaced by a bank statement displayed in crisp detail on the screen behind me. "This is our Foundation's account activity for September 2024, I announced. "Notice the highlighted transactions. 7 unauthorized withdrawals totaling $34,000, all bearing my supposedly genuine signature." Murmurs began spreading through the crowd. Rebecca tried to stand, but seemed unsteady, the Zoloft making her movements sluggish and uncertain. "Arthur," she said, her voice thick, "you're confusing people. Your memory—" "My memory is perfect," I interrupted firmly. "Jake, next slide, please." The screen now showed a side-by-side comparison of my genuine signature with the forged versions on Rebecca's checks. Even from the back of the room, the differences were obvious. Forensic handwriting analysis reveals that 47 checks were forged over an 18-month period. The total amount stolen from children's literacy programs, $890,247. The room erupted. Gasps, angry whispers, people turning to stare at Rebecca with shock and disgust. Dorothy Hawkins stood up, her face grim with vindication. "Arthur, I can confirm these findings," Dorothy called out. "I've spent 3 months verifying that money, supposedly spent on books, never reached the children it was intended for." Rebecca was now visibly struggling. The medication was affecting her coordination and cognitive function exactly as she'd intended it to affect me. She tried to speak, but her words came out jumbled. "This is—" Arthur's confused. "I would never—" "Next slide, Jake." The projection screen now displayed one of Rebecca's deleted emails, the one where she discussed accelerating her timeline because the old man is getting suspicious. Patricia Stone from the bank stood up, her face pale. Mr. Caldwell, if these allegations are true, I need to contact our fraud department immediately. They're not allegations, Patricia. They're documented facts. Next slide. Now the screen showed photographs of Rebecca's lifestyle improvements over the past 18 months. The BMW X5, the European vacation, the Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Each image was annotated with purchase dates and estimated costs. $89,000 for the BMW, $17,000 for the motorcycle, $12,000 for the Italy trip, all purchased during the same period when foundation money was being stolen. Rebecca tried to stand again, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The Zoloft was hitting her harder now, making her appear exactly as she'd intended me to appear. Confused, disoriented, unable to defend herself coherently. Please, she managed to say, though her speech was becoming more slurred. I can explain. Arthur's sick. He doesn't understand. Actually, Rebecca, I understand perfectly. I understand that you've been telling people I have a dementia to cover your theft. I understand that you drugged my wine tonight to incapacitate me during your power grab. And I understand that you just drank that drugged wine yourself. The crowd's attention snapped to Rebecca, who was now obviously impaired. Several people pulled out phones to record her condition. That's right, I continued. Rebecca dissolved a 50-milligram Zoloft tablet in my wine, planning to make me appear mentally unfit while she seized control of the foundation. But I switched our glasses. She's been drugging herself for the past 20 minutes. Dr. Harrison approached the head table, his medical training overriding the social awkwardness. Rebecca, how are you feeling? Do you need medical attention? She couldn't answer coherently. The words came out as fragments. Arthur, lying. I never help him. The final slide, Jake. The projection screen now displayed a clear photograph of Rebecca in my kitchen just hours earlier, crushing the Zoloft tablet between two spoons. The hidden camera had captured every detail in perfect clarity. This photo was taken at 4:30 this afternoon. As you can see, Rebecca is preparing the drug she intended to slip into my wine. She's also been recorded on multiple occasions, discussing my supposed mental decline and her plans to gain control of Foundation assets. The room had gone completely silent, except for the sound of Rebecca trying unsuccessfully to form coherent sentences. I looked out at the shocked faces of my community people who'd trusted Rebecca, admired her, held her up as an example of selfless service. This woman stole nearly $900,000 from children who needed books. She's been systematically destroying my reputation to cover her crimes. And tonight, she tried to drug me into submission so she could complete her theft. Timothy sat frozen at his table, staring at his wife with horrified recognition. The question now, I said, is what we do about it. What happened next was like watching a dam burst. 3 months of suppressed suspicions, ignored red flags, and manipulated loyalties came flooding out all at once. Patricia Stone from the bank was already on her phone with Riverside Police Department. Yes, this is Patricia Stone at Community Bank. I'm reporting suspected fraud involving a nonprofit account. We need officers at the community center immediately. Dr. Harrison knelt beside Rebecca, checking her pulse and pupils while she continued to mumble incoherently. She's clearly under the influence of something. Her coordination is severely impaired. Timothy finally found his voice, though it came out as a broken whisper. Rebecca, is this true? Did you really? Dorothy Hawkins had taken control of her section of the room, addressing the Foundation board members who were present. I have documentation of every fraudulent transaction, phone records of my calls to schools that never received the books Rebecca claimed to deliver, email evidence of her deception. But it was Jake Mitchell who provided the most damning evidence. He'd been recording everything on his phone, and now he played back Rebecca's drugging attempt in real time for the crowd to see. Here's the moment she handed Mr. Caldwell the doctored wine, Jake announced, holding his phone high so everyone could see the screen. Notice how deliberately she presents it, making sure multiple people witness her thoughtfulness. The video showed Rebecca's calculated performance in crystal clarity. Her practiced smile, the way she'd positioned herself for maximum visibility, the theatrical flourish as she handed me the glass. And here, Jake continued, advancing the video, is the moment Mr. Caldwell switched the glasses while she was distracted greeting other guests. People crowded around Jake's phone, watching my sleight of hand with amazement. In the video, my movements looked casual, natural, just an elderly man adjusting his position while holding his wine. But the camera angle clearly showed the switch. Margaret Foster, the elementary school principal, stepped forward with fury in her voice. Rebecca came to my office 6 months ago claiming Arthur was showing signs of confusion. She suggested we might need to gently transition away from foundation partnerships to protect him from embarrassment. More voices joined in, each revelation building the case against Rebecca's systematic manipulation. She told me Arthur had forgotten our lunch appointment 3 times, said Carol Thompson, a longtime teaching colleague. I felt so sorry for him. I even suggested he see a specialist. She warned me that Arthur might start making erratic financial decisions, added Robert Martinez from the town council. Said we should be prepared to step in if necessary. The pattern was becoming undeniable. Rebecca hadn't just stolen money, she'd orchestrated a comprehensive character assassination designed to destroy my credibility while positioning herself as my protector. Meanwhile, Rebecca continued to deteriorate. The Zoloft was affecting her more severely than she'd probably intended it to affect me. Her head lolled to one side, and she couldn't maintain focus when people spoke to her. Ironic, I said to the crowd, that the medication she chose to incapacitate me is now making her appear exactly as she claimed I was, confused, disoriented, and unreliable. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Through the community center's windows, we could see flashing lights approaching. Timothy stood up slowly, his face ashen. Dad, I'm so sorry. I believed her. When she said you were having memory problems, I believed her because she seemed so concerned, so caring. She's very good at manipulation, son. That's what made her so dangerous. Officer Sarah Chen entered the hall, followed by 2 other officers. Patricia Stone immediately approached them with bank documents, while Jake transferred his video evidence to Officer Chen's phone. We'll need statements from everyone, Officer Chen announced. But first, let's secure the scene and ensure the impaired individual receives proper medical attention. An ambulance arrived within minutes. As paramedics checked Rebecca's vital signs and prepared to transport her for medical evaluation, she made one final attempt to control the narrative. Arthur did this to me, she managed to slur out, pointing weakly in my direction. He's sick, dangerous. Dr. Harrison shook his head. She's clearly under the influence of a sedative medication. Her accusations aren't reliable in this condition. But Officer Chen was already reviewing Jake's video evidence on her phone. Mr. Caldwell, this recording shows the suspect attempting to drug you. Do you want to press charges? Absolutely. As paramedics loaded Rebecca onto a stretcher, Dorothy approached the microphone I'd abandoned. I want everyone here to know something important, she announced. Arthur didn't just catch a thief tonight. He exposed someone who was systematically destroying his reputation while stealing from children. She held up a manila folder, thick with documentation. Over the past 3 months, Arthur and I have verified that Rebecca Mason Caldwell stole $890,000 from the Sarah Caldwell Children's Literacy Foundation, money that was supposed to buy books for children who couldn't afford them. The crowd's murmur turned angry. These were parents, teachers, and community members who donated their own money to help local kids learn to read. But here's what makes this even more personal, Dorothy continued. That foundation money came from Arthur's life savings. Every dollar Rebecca stole was money Arthur and his late wife Sarah had saved for their retirement. He donated it all to help children, and she stole it to fund her lifestyle. The room went dead silent as the full scope of Rebecca's betrayal sank in. Arthur gave up his security to help kids read, Dorothy said, her voice breaking slightly, and she repaid that generosity by trying to destroy him. Timothy walked over to where I stood, tears streaming down his face. Dad, how can I ever make this right? You can start by helping us recover what's left and rebuild what she destroyed. As police finished taking initial statements and Rebecca was transported to the hospital for evaluation, I looked around the room at faces filled with anger, sympathy, and determination. The Foundation will survive this, I announced, and so will I. 3 months later, I sat in the Riverside County Courthouse watching Rebecca Mason Caldwell accept a plea agreement for felony embezzlement, fraud, and attempted assault with a dangerous substance. The woman who entered that courtroom bore no resemblance to the polished community saint who'd tried to destroy me. Her blonde hair had grown out to show gray roots. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a standard orange jumpsuit. The confident smile that had charmed so many people was nowhere to be seen. Judge Patricia Williams reviewed the terms: 5 years in state prison, full restitution of $890,247, plus interest and penalties. Rebecca would also be permanently barred from serving on any nonprofit boards or handling charitable funds. "Do you understand these terms, Ms. Mason Caldwell?" Judge Williams asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Rebecca replied, her voice barely audible. Timothy sat beside me in the gallery, having filed for divorce 2 weeks after the retirement party incident. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed," he whispered. "The expensive purchases, the trips, the way she always had explanations for everything. She was very good at her job," I replied. "That's what made her so dangerous." The investigation had revealed the full scope of Rebecca's deception. Beyond the foundation theft, she'd also been skimming money from 2 other charities where she volunteered. The total across all organizations approached $1.3 million. But perhaps more importantly, the community response had been overwhelming. Within a week of the retirement party exposure, donations to rebuild the Sarah Caldwell Children's Literacy Foundation exceeded $200,000. Local businesses pledged ongoing support. The school district committed to matching funds for book purchases. Dorothy Hawkins had agreed to serve as the foundation's new executive director, bringing her decades of nonprofit experience and unquestionable integrity to the role. Our first board meeting since Rebecca's arrest had drawn 12 new volunteers, all committed to transparency and accountability. "Mr. Caldwell," Judge Williams said, addressing me directly, "would you like to make a statement before sentencing?" I stood slowly, feeling the weight of everyone's attention. Rebecca finally looked at me directly for the first time since her arrest. "Your Honor, Rebecca Mason Caldwell didn't just steal money. She stole trust, hope, and resources meant for children who needed them most. She attempted to destroy my reputation and credibility to cover her crimes. She manipulated my family, my friends, and my entire community." Rebecca's shoulders sagged lower with each word. "But she also revealed something important about our town." When the truth came out, people didn't turn away. They stepped up. They donated, volunteered, and recommitted to helping children learn to read. In trying to destroy the foundation, she actually made it stronger. I paused, looking directly at Rebecca. I don't forgive her. Forgiveness requires genuine remorse, and I've seen no evidence of that. But I don't hate her either. Hate would give her power over me that she doesn't deserve. Judge Williams nodded approvingly. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Ms. Mason Caldwell, you have stolen from some of society's most vulnerable members' children seeking education. Your sentence reflects the seriousness of that betrayal." The gavel fell. Rebecca was led away in shackles, her 5-year journey through the state prison system beginning immediately. Outside the courthouse, reporters from 3 local news stations waited for interviews. The story had gained regional attention as an example of both nonprofit fraud and community resilience. "Mr. Caldwell, how did you maintain your composure during 3 months of investigation?" asked Channel 7's Melissa Rodriguez. "I learned long ago that emotion clouds judgment. I needed clear thinking and solid evidence, not anger. What's next for the Literacy Foundation?" Dorothy stepped forward to answer that one. "We're implementing new oversight procedures that make this kind of theft impossible. Triple signature requirements for all expenditures over $500. Monthly board review of all transactions. And complete transparency, our financial records will be available for public review at any time." "And what about Rebecca's claims that you were suffering from dementia?" another reporter asked. I smiled grimly. "I think my successful investigation and prosecution of her crimes speaks to my mental clarity. Sometimes the best response to lies is simply demonstrating the truth." 6 months later, the foundation hosted its first annual transparency dinner. Instead of a celebration at the community center, we held it at Lincoln Elementary School, one of the schools that Rebecca had claimed received books but never did. 150 children who'd received books through our rebuilt program attended with their families. The school gymnasium was decorated with their artwork and short essays about their favorite stories. 8-year-old Maria Gonzalez approached the microphone during the program. "Mr. Arthur gave me books about dragons and princesses. Before, I didn't like reading because it was hard. Now I read every night with my mom. Timothy, who'd moved back in with me temporarily while rebuilding his life, leaned over during the applause. Mom would have loved this, he said, referring to Sarah. She did love it, I replied. That's why we're still here. The foundation now serves 12 schools, maintains partnerships with 4 libraries, and has distributed over 75,000 books to children throughout the county. Our annual budget, carefully managed and transparently reported, exceeds $800,000. Rebecca Mason Caldwell became eligible for parole after serving 3 years of her sentence. She was denied. The parole board cited her continued refusal to acknowledge the full impact of her crimes on the children she'd stolen from. Sometimes people ask if I regret trusting her initially. I don't. Trust is necessary for any functioning community, but so is verification, accountability, and the courage to act when that trust is violated. The Sarah Caldwell Children's Literacy Foundation thrives, not despite Rebecca's betrayal, but because of how we responded to it. We chose transparency over secrecy, community over isolation, and action over paralysis. And sometimes late at night, when I'm reading foundation reports or reviewing donation records, I think about that retirement party. How Rebecca's attempt to silence me with drugs and lies instead gave me the perfect opportunity to expose her completely.